All right, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom. You are live and direct with your Akazaki Yahoo, giving all praises, honor, and great esteem unto the Most High Power, Yahuwah Bahashem, Yahushua HaMashiach, and to the 12 tribes of Israel who are scattered to the four corners of the earth. I say, Shalom wa Baruchim, that is peace and blessings. And I cannot wait to the day that the Most High brings us back together, and we are once again 12 tribes, one family, one nation, under the Most High Power, under one covenant, and back in our own land with a heart of flesh and not a heart of stone. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
Yes, indeed. I'm joined this afternoon by my most esteemed Aga Kenanaya. Shabbat Shalom, Aki.
Hey, Shabbat Shalom, Maki. Shabbat Shalom, Yasharal. Call Halal Yahweh. Bahashem, Hamashiach, Yahweh Shah. Barak Atah. No, Salakia. Barak Hashem. Wa Barak Atham.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah. All praises to the Most High Power, Yahweh, in the name of his beloved Son, Yahweh Shah, the Messiah, the King. Bless Yahweh and bless you. Hallelujah.
God.
To the Abba. Hallelujah. All right. So we are back again. This lovely, wonderful, magnificent Sabbath yom that the Most High have enjoined unto us. Bringing praises to his name. First of all, he is our power, and we love him and adore him so very much for all that he has done, all he is doing, and all that he will do. And we are back for a video review at this time, and we'll come back with some scripts in a bit. But right now, at this very moment, we're going to jump into a video review. We found a brand new channel as a YouTube channel. It is called 400 Years. You see it in the description box there. We've also included the videos that we've got, 400 Years Unleashed, Salakia, 400 Years Unleashed. Also included the videos that we will be covering and the good information that we will be getting. So feel free to go to that channel, check them out, give them a like, give them a subscription, whatever the case. But you're live and direct with Zaki Yahoo and Akinanaya, and we're going to get directly to it. Welcome to 400 Years. And yeah, glad to be a part of them. So this first video is the baddest white dude in America meet the most famous black man. So who y'all think this is? Give a you know what I'm saying, take a guess at it, and let's get to it.
In this episode, we're going to dive into the riveting saga of John Brown and Frederick Douglass, two iconic figures of the 19th century abolitionist movement. Witness their converging and diverging paths, complex relationship, and the turbulent events surrounding the Harper's Ferry raid. As we delve deep, we will explore the strained alliance of these two historic giants in their fight against the brutal institution of slavery, and understand the true cost of their convictions. And we will uncover the profound impacts their actions had on America's trajectory towards civil war. In the process, we reveal the transformative power of determination and sacrifice. Join us on this enlightening journey as we explore the rich tapestry of Black history and celebrate the resilience, strength, and triumphs of our ancestors. John Brown and Frederick Douglass were two of the most prominent abolitionists of the 19th century. Brown was known for his militant tactics in the fight against slavery, while Douglass, the former slave, became a powerful orator and writer who advocated for the end of slavery. Although they shared the same goal, their approaches were wildly different, and their relationship was often strained. In fact, John Brown's actions almost got Frederick Douglass killed. Frederick Douglass first encountered John Brown in 1847, and the two men had a complex relationship from the very beginning. Brown was passionate, almost maniacally so, about the utter inhumanity of slavery, and he was willing to sacrifice everything to bring about its end. Brown was not an easy person to love, but with a mixture of admiration and ambivalence, Douglass recognized Brown's visionary nature. The relationship between John Brown and Frederick Douglass was marked by Brown's militant and violent stance against slavery, which greatly influenced Douglass's own radicalism in the 1850s. But Douglass remained wary of Brown because, though not lacking in passion and vision, Douglass felt Brown had a secretive nature and strategic ineptness that didn't bode well for success, especially when Brown implored Douglass to join the Harper's Ferry raid. The two men first met in 1847 at Brown's home in Springfield, Massachusetts. While Douglass was already famous for his background as an enslaved person and his escape from captivity, it was Brown, a white man with a string of failed businesses and unwavering religious fervor, who appeared determined to put an end to the cruel institution of slavery. Douglass, in his 1881 autobiography Life and Times of Frederick Douglass, recalled being impressed by Brown's physical stature, his lean, strong, and sinewy build, and noticed how Brown's children held him in reverence. But it was Brown's impassioned words that left the strongest impression on Douglass, as Brown detailed a plan to liberate the enslaved and guide them to freedom through the Appalachian Mountains. In his recounting of their meetings, Douglass was impressed that Brown demonstrated that he had carefully considered his plans and provided measured responses to Douglass's inquiries. Brown explained that armed men would be stationed at strategic checkpoints, ready to descend into towns to rally the enslaved and secure provisions. Even if they were cornered by authorities, Brown believed that dying for such a noble cause would be a fitting end. Douglass, initially a supporter of William Lloyd Garrison's non-resistance abolitionism, underwent a transformation in his beliefs after spending a night at Brown's home. The encounter left him increasingly skeptical of the peaceful abolition of slavery, and his speeches and writings began to reflect Brown's strong convictions. In his autobiography, Douglass wrote, "While I continued to write and speak against slavery, I became all the same less hopeful of its peaceful abolition. My utterances became more and more tinged by the color of this man's strong impressions." Meanwhile, Brown's involvement in the violent, bleeding Kansas conflicts elevated his national profile, earning admiration from those who believed that only bloodshed could end slavery. Douglass, who encountered Brown frequently during this tumultuous period, grew to hold a more favorable impression of Brown and developed a deeper respect for Brown's character. Douglass wrote, "I met him often during this struggle, and all I saw of him gave me a more favorable impression of the man and inspired me with a higher respect for his character." Brown frequently stayed with Douglass during his trips back east to acquire money and arms during the late 1850s. In late January 1858, Brown visited Douglass's home in Rochester, New York, where he stayed for a month. During this secluded period, Brown worked on drafting his provisional constitution for Virginia, intending to overthrow the state through his raid on Harper's Ferry's federal arsenal in Virginia. But something was nagging at Douglass. Despite his growing militancy, Douglass still believed in the significance of political action to bring an end to slavery, which put him at odds with Brown's increasing radicalism. Douglass found some of Brown's decisions and ideas questionable, and sometimes downright crazy. He did not get along with Hugh Forbes, an Englishman hired by Brown as his military strategist during Forbes's visits to Rochester from 1857 through 1858. Douglass found Forbes to be unreliable, both with finances and personal trust. On May 8, 1858, Brown visited Chatham, Ontario, a refuge for escaped slaves from the United States through the Underground Railroad. There, 12 white men and 34 black men endorsed a constitution for the republic Brown intended to create following his slave uprising. Although Douglass was intrigued by the clandestine plotters against slavery, he did not attend Brown's convention. In March 1859, both men, along with other abolitionist leaders, convened at the home of the prominent black Detroit resident, William Webb. But the men were unable to resolve the stalemate arising from their differing views. John Brown and his plans held a captivating allure and a glimmer of hope, but he remained a challenging figure to truly love. Brown and Douglass met for the final time at a quarry near Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, in August 1859. This time, Brown presented the full scope of his plan to capture the federal armory at the Harper's Ferry, Virginia arsenal and to arm the enslaved for a major insurrection. Sitting on large rocks, Brown and Douglas engaged in a discussion about Brown's plans. Brown earnestly implored Douglas to join his small group of dedicated warriors, expressing a specific purpose for his involvement. Douglas recalled Brown's words, "I want you for a special purpose. When I strike, the bees will begin to swarm, and I want you to help hive them." Douglas was disheartened by the shift in Brown's intentions. He had initially understood that Brown aimed to free slaves in Virginia and guide them to safety in the Appalachian Mountains. Yet now, Brown seemed fixated on attacking the federal arsenal, a move Douglas deemed desperate and mistaken. Despite Douglas's warning about the perilous nature of the plan, Brown brushed off the concerns and continued to press for Douglas's participation. While Douglas ultimately declined Brown's pleas, he allowed his companion, Shields Green, to make his own decision. Douglas recounted that Green responded, "I believe I'll go with the old man," he said, willingly accepting his fate of dying at Harper's Ferry. After declining to join the ill-fated Harper's Ferry raid on October 16, 1859, Douglas anxiously awaited news of the attack. The nation was electrified by reports of the assault on the federal arsenal at the confluence of the Potomac and Shenandoah rivers. As Douglas had warned, the raid ended in disaster, with most of the participants either captured or killed. Following Brown's arrest, a letter from Douglas to the old warrior, written in 1857, was among the documents seized. This led outraged Virginians to accuse Douglas of being a co-conspirator in Brown's actions. Douglas, who was lecturing in Philadelphia at the time news of the raid reached him, hastily returned home to Rochester, fearing that if caught and sent to Virginia, he would be killed for being Frederick Douglass. While it is likely that Brown shared more details of his revolutionary plans with Douglas than the orator admitted publicly, Douglas never found Brown's plans or leadership convincing. There is some dispute about the accuracy of Douglas's version of events. John E. Cook, one of Brown's captured men, claimed that Douglas had reneged on a promise to bring additional men to the raid. Brown, refusing to implicate his associates before his death sentence, reportedly expressed frustration to a friend, attributing the missed opportunity at Harper's Ferry to the famous Mr. Frederick Douglass. Accused of being tied to a man facing treason charges, Frederick Douglass defended himself in an October 31st letter to the Rochester Democrat and American. He vehemently denied making any promises to join the raid and clarified that he never encouraged or supported the takeover of Harper's Ferry. But, aware of the trouble he faced due to his public association with the accused, Douglas left for England in November. Under a cloud of suspicion, Douglas felt he had no choice but to flee his country. In the rebuttal to Cook's denunciation, he declared that the taking of Harper's Ferry was a measure never encouraged by my word or by my vote. My field of labor for the abolition of slavery has not extended to an attack on the United States arsenal. Despite his rhetoric, within the heated climate, Douglas felt, he had no real chance of convincing white America of his innocence. This is why, under cover of darkness on October 22nd, with an arrest warrant issued and federal marshals closing in on his upstate New York hometown, Douglas embarked on a ferry across Lake Ontario, a route he had once guided many escaped slaves through. Faced with anxiety and limited options, Douglas embarked on a lecture trip to England, a journey he had previously planned but now undertook in unexpected circumstances. John Brown and his remaining accomplices were executed on December 2nd, 1859, for treason, murder, and inciting slave insurrection. There is no doubt that Frederick Douglass, while advocating for his legal innocence, embraced violence and positioned himself as a moral ally of John Brown. This perspective became common among abolitionists, including some Republican politicians. Douglass expressed his readiness to take action against slavery through various means, such as writing, speaking, publishing, organizing, and even conspiring, as long as there was a reasonable hope of success. Douglass believed that those who deprived others of their labor and freedom had forsaken justice and honor, becoming akin to thieves and pirates. Importantly, Douglass clarified that his objection was not to Brown's ultimate goals or justifications, but rather to his specific methods and tactics. He highlighted that Harriet Beecher Stowe's novel, Uncle Tom's Cabin, demonstrated the necessity of lawlessness as a weapon for abolitionists. The Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 had turned virtually all radical abolitionists into lawbreakers. Douglass was willing to defy the law and even kill those he deemed as pirates. But he recognized that effectively combating slavery and its pervasive influence required more than courage and justification. It demanded exceptional cunning, skill, mobilization, and military prowess. Returning to America from England in 1860 after the loss of his beloved daughter Annie, Douglass found his family in mourning and the nation on the verge of disunion. Within his arsenal of rhetorical weapons against slavery and soon the Confederacy, John Brown's death remained a powerful symbol. Despite Brown's challenging nature during his lifetime, his significance in death was undeniable. The Brown family, however, harbored bitterness towards Douglass, feeling betrayed by his actions. In a country on the brink of civil war the following summer, Douglass recognized the value of invoking Brown as a martyr for the anti-slavery cause and as a means to recruit Union soldiers. Having accomplished his mission with the Union's victory, Douglass later celebrated his fallen friend through speeches delivered on multiple occasions, including one at Storer College in Harper's Ferry in 1881. Douglass held a profound appreciation for Brown's enduring value to the cause of Black freedom, consistently eulogizing him as a martyr and a classical hero. In the Storer College speech, he depicted the Armory raid as a resounding thunderclap that ignited a morally deteriorating nation into action. Douglass emphatically proclaimed that Brown's defeat marked his true triumph, and his capture became the victory of his life. Reflecting on his own ambivalence towards Brown's plans in 1859, Douglass acknowledged the remarkable power of his symbol following the execution, encapsulating the significance of the aged warrior. Douglass recognized Brown's unwavering commitment to his cause, emphasizing the transformative nature of his sacrifice. Brown's execution on the gallows took on a sacred significance comparable to the Christian cross, symbolizing his profound devotion and unyielding resolve. In the wake of Brown's martyrdom, Douglass continued to honor his memory and the impact he had on the fight for Black freedom. Of John Brown, he said, "With the Appalachian Mountains for his pulpit, the country for his church, and the whole civilized world for his audience, he was 1,000 times more effective as a preacher than as a warrior." Despite his lack of skill in executing revolutionary violence, Brown managed to incite a broader revolution in America through his actions. In the conclusion of the Storer College speech, Douglass declared, "When John Brown stretched forth his arms, the sky was cleared. The time for compromise was gone, and to the armed hosts of freedom, standing above the chasm of a broken union, was committed the decision of the sword, and thus made her own, and not John Brown's, the lost cause." As a result, Douglass held Brown in eternal reverence as the hero of the abolitionist movement. During his speeches recruiting Black soldiers in 1863, Douglass would often burst into song, leading the crowd in "John Brown's Body," invoking Brown's spirit, and inspiring young men to join the fight against slavery. Brown had evolved into more than just an adored figure. He embodied the very essence that kept the cause for freedom alive and propelled it forward during challenging times. The impact of the events at Harper's Ferry had a transformative effect on the nation. It unleashed a tide of anger that traumatized white Americans from all backgrounds. Southerners were gripped by fear of large-scale slave rebellions, while Northerners, who had hoped to postpone violent confrontations over slavery, were radicalized by the incident. Many abolitionists and Black Americans considered Brown and his raiders heroes. The raid struck a sharp and emotional chord in the Black American community. Frances Ellen Watkins, a prominent Black abolitionist of the day, wrote to John Brown while he awaited his fate in a Virginia prison cell, "We may earnestly hope that your fate will not be a vain lesson, that it will intensify our hatred of slavery and love of freedom, and that your martyred grave will be a sacred altar upon which men will record their vows of undying hatred to that system which tramples on man and bids defiance to God." Prior to Harper's Ferry, political leaders believed that the growing divide between the North and South could eventually be resolved through compromise. But after the events at Harper's Ferry, the divide seemed insurmountable. It fractured the Democratic Party, disrupted the Republican leadership, and created the conditions that propelled Republican candidate Abraham Lincoln to victory in the 1860 presidential election. If John Brown's raid had not taken place, the 1860 election would likely have been a standard two-party contest between anti-slavery Republicans and pro-slavery Democrats. The Democrats would probably have emerged victorious, given that Lincoln received only 40% of the popular vote, around 1 million votes fewer than his three opponents. The Democratic Party faced internal divisions over the issue of slavery, while Republican candidates like William Seward were tainted by their association with abolitionists. In contrast, Lincoln, seen as one of the more conservative options within his party at the time, benefited from the fragmentation of his opponents. By disrupting the established party system, Brown inadvertently facilitated Lincoln's victory, which, in turn, led to the secession of 11 states and, ultimately, the Civil War. While Brown was initially dismissed by white historians as an irrational fanatic or worse, a more nuanced view has emerged with the civil rights movement and a deeper understanding of the nation's racial challenges. Brown, though seen as hard and unconventional, possessed a profound empathy for the plight of the enslaved. He defied the pervasive racism of his time and formed close friendships with Black Americans, often feeling more at ease in their company than with fellow whites. This has been 400 Years. Thank you for joining us on this journey of exploration into the heroic struggle for freedom and justice.
Wow. So what a dynamic video and highly informative for you who did not have much information about Frederick Douglass and John Brown. Now, you've been like, go ahead,
Very informative video. I was totally unaware that John Brown had gotten as far as to make a constitution. He had legit plans for succeeding from the United States and kind of forming his own little country with our people. This man was definitely before his time, and what I mean when I say that, he wasn't just talking the talk. He actually was walking the walk as well. Here's like what this has also invoked. So I'm listening to the plight of Frederick Douglass, and I'm aware that he is so where I'm going with this, Frederick Douglass fled out of fear of what would be done to him being associated with John Brown. So Frederick Douglass, definitely appears to be a so-called black man, right? But we know that his father was a Gentile,
right?
So, but knowing all of that, it would appear that Frederick Douglass would still be in need of salvation, even with his father being a Gentile and him really being a Gentile as well. He was still in need of saving. Just a side note, that's not what we were discussing with this video, but just where my mind went, like with this, thinking about what we were covering.
Yeah, it definitely. No, not only him, even John Brown was in need of salvation because what I'm saying, he was willing to stand and ultimately sacrifice himself, and his sacrifice wasn't for naught. His sacrifice went to the getting moving us to where we are today, which not necessarily the best thing, but it definitely got us where we can own property, where we can we don't have to be inconvenienced by some of these ridiculous laws and ideas. And speaking of, I'm gonna have to add that to it because there's another video that we gotta check out, which I have to add on to the end of here. But
Yeah.
so
But it's very ironic that they were fighting. John Brown was fighting against the federal forces, which was the Union Army.
right.
If he would have just waited, perhaps a year later, the Union Army would have been fighting for, against the South. They
Yeah.
would have been fighting for his cause.
Right.
Just a year later. But that's definitely some irony there.
Well, it's he alluded to the idea that his actions propelled that into place. So if perhaps if he didn't try to take the armory, which he said the name of it, I can't remember the name of it, but if they didn't do that and they didn't have to fight against the Union Army, then who knows if the Civil War would ever came about? You know what I'm saying? So that's interesting. That's interesting because you never can tell. If you go left, will you get to the same destination, or if you go right, would it be the same destination? If you don't go on a straight, if you deviate from the historical path, are you gonna get to the destination? That's always the question. Like you never know, if things would have went differently. So interesting, and thought provoking. So good stuff. That's what makes a good video, when you can make people think and hold their interest. So next video here, same people, 400 Years Unchained or Unleashed. Slack this one is called How One State Destroyed Black People for Centuries and Still Doing It. And they still doing it. So that's interesting. Now I have not previewed this video, so this will be all news to me. I got an idea what state this is. I want y'all to think about it and see if you're right. All right, here we go.
This episode, we're tearing open the haunting darkness of Mississippi's past, plunging into a chilling saga of racial terror and relentless brutality. Journey with us into the heart of darkness, where unspeakable atrocities met steely resilience, and discover a state's legacy drenched in blood and rebellion. Brace yourself.
You said
For
Mississippi.
Mississippi's harrowing history awaits. Situated in the southern United States, the state of Mississippi has been, throughout its history, the stark epicenter of racial subjugation and brutality. During its antebellum period, the state's culture, politics, and societal structures were deeply anchored in the institution of slavery. Massive cotton plantations relied heavily on the forced labor of enslaved Africans, with slave owners often resorting to extreme violence and intimidation to maintain control. Mississippi's economic prosperity was inextricably linked to this system of oppression, and social hierarchies were ruthlessly maintained to keep Black people subordinated. This era set the stage for the profound racial challenges Mississippi would face in the years following the Civil War. So, join us on this enlightening journey as we explore the rich tapestry of Black history and celebrate the resilience, strength, and triumphs of our ancestors. Spanning from the late 18th century to 1861, the antebellum period in the United States was marked by significant growth in the southern U.S. due to the expansion of the plantation system and the rise of King Cotton, which heavily depended on the labor of enslaved Africans. This reliance on slavery was at the heart of the origins of racial terror in the state and in the nation. The economic interests, coupled with societal beliefs in white supremacy, manifested in a climate of intimidation, violence, and fear directed towards Black people in Mississippi. Meanwhile, the northern states were becoming more industrialized and urbanized. The era was characterized by increasing tensions between the North and South over issues such as states' rights, westward expansion, and especially the institution of slavery. These disputes eventually culminated in the outbreak of the American Civil War in 1861. Cultural, economic, and political developments during the antebellum period were foundational to the nation's future trajectory and the eventual conflict between the Union and the Confederacy. Among the Deep South states, Mississippi's geographical advantage, characterized by its lush delta region, positioned it as a pivotal player in the American cotton industry. The sprawling fields, nourished by the nutrient-rich alluvial soils deposited by the Mississippi River, provided the ideal conditions for cotton cultivation. Indeed, by the mid-19th century, the Mississippi Delta, often simply referred to as the Delta, emerged as an astonishing epicenter of wealth in the United States. This region, the Delta, lying in the distinctive northwest section of Mississippi and small portions of Arkansas and Louisiana, stretches between the Mississippi and Yazoo rivers. As the insatiable global demand for cotton grew, vast plantations sprawled across the Delta, producing staggering amounts of the white gold. The economic boom transformed the region into an enclave of affluence, where opulent mansions rose amidst the sea of cotton fields, and plantation owners amassed great fortunes that rivaled those of European aristocrats. However, the backbone of this prosperity was the horrifying institution of slavery, where countless African men, women, and children were brutally uprooted from their homelands, subjected to the harrowing Middle Passage, and then forced into a life of unending toil, suffering, and terror on these cotton plantations. The intricate relationship between Mississippi's cotton wealth and slavery was inextricable. Plantation owners and other stakeholders, including merchants and financiers, accrued immense profits from the cotton industry. But these profits were predicated upon the exploitation of enslaved Africans. Their labor, provided without consent and without compensation, drastically reduced production costs and maximized profits for the white elite. Given the magnitude of economic interests intertwined with slavery, it's unsurprising that the white establishment in Mississippi adopted an uncompromising stance against any challenges to this system. Even minor infractions or hints of disobedience from enslaved people were perceived as direct threats to the status quo. The paranoia of a potential large-scale rebellion, inspired by stories from other regions or even whispers of abolitionist sentiments, led to a heightened state of alert among white Mississippians. In response, a culture of surveillance and intimidation was fostered, ensuring that enslaved Black Americans were kept in a constant state of fear and subjugation. Life for the enslaved in Mississippi was marked by severe hardship, deprivation, and a lack of personal freedoms. Slaves, whether working in fields, homes, or trades, were subjected to long hours of labor. The dominant crop in Mississippi was cotton, and those working in the fields experienced grueling work from sunrise to sunset, 6 days a week. Overseers and slave owners maintained a strict regime, often using violence as a tool of control, ensuring maximum productivity. Living conditions for slaves were basic and harsh. They resided in rudimentary cabins, usually made of logs with dirt floors, offering little protection from weather extremes. Their diet was basic, mainly consisting of staples like cornmeal, pork, and occasional vegetables. Clothing was limited, often just 1 or 2 sets of coarse garments a year. Personal freedoms were non-existent. Slaves couldn't travel without permission, had no legal rights to family, marriage, or their children, and learning to read or write was typically forbidden. Punishments for perceived transgressions, whether attempts to escape or mere acts of defiance, were severe. Enslaved people faced whipping, mutilation, or even death as retribution, sending a clear message to others about the costs of resistance. These brutal tactics were not only about maintaining economic order, but also about reinforcing racial hierarchies and the notion of white supremacy in the social and political fabric of Mississippi. Slaves, on average, were expected to live into their mid-30s to early 40s, though many died in childhood. It's estimated that 1/3 of enslaved children did not survive to adulthood. Those working on cotton plantations in Mississippi faced grueling conditions that further diminished their life expectancy. The combination of strenuous labor, malnutrition, exposure to diseases like malaria and dysentery, inadequate medical care, and the physical and psychological trauma of enslavement made long-term survival challenging. Additionally, the possibility of being separated from family members and the associated psychological stress could further impact the health and lifespan of slaves in the region. In a number of Mississippi counties, the demographic scales tilted in favor of the enslaved Black population. surpassing the number of white residents significantly. This disproportionality, while an outcome of the state's dependence on enslaved labor for its agricultural prosperity, sowed seeds of unease and trepidation among the white populace. Despite being the economic and political power holders, the numerical disadvantage placed white Mississippians in a unique conundrum of perceived vulnerability. At the core of slavery lay the perpetuation of dominance and control. Consequently, the inherent fear among white Mississippians was that this sizable enslaved black population, if given a chance, might rally together, rebel, and overturn the oppressive status quo. While episodes of resistance from enslaved black people were not uncommon, the overarching white sentiment exaggerated these incidents, transforming occasional acts of defiance into imagined widespread, organized revolts. In her renowned Civil War diary, Mary Chesnut pondered the thoughts and emotions of her family's slaves. She questioned if they were aware of the Confederate government's claim over Fort Sumter, and if they perceived the promise of freedom in the distant cannon fire. Not by one word or look can we detect any change in the demeanor of these Negro servants, she wrote. Lawrence, her husband's valet, remains at our door, as sleepy, respectful, and seemingly unaffected as ever. They all seem this way. Their apparent indifference to the ongoing commotion in the bay, even though it's constantly audible, is striking. People converse around them as if they were mere furniture, yet they remain unmoved. Is it their genuine nature, or are they quietly waiting for the right moment? Throughout the war, Mary sought to understand the African individuals around her, yet their expressions remained enigmatic, leaving her uneasy. She wondered about their intentions, whether to revolt or escape to the north. Their faces, she remarked, are as mysterious as the Sphinx. While Mary Chesnut often praised the gentle nature of Southern women, she occasionally struggled to uphold the very standards she admired. Known to have a fiery temper and sharp wit when agitated, she was, however, notably reserved about one particular topic in public: slavery. Even though her affluence was derived from the institution of slavery, she harbored deep resentment towards it. God forgive us, but ours is a monstrous system, and wrong and iniquity, she penned in a March 1861 diary entry. Another event, the uprising led by Nat Turner in Virginia in 1831, significantly exacerbated these anxieties. Though geographically separate from Mississippi, the reverberations of Turner's rebellion were felt throughout the southern states. The revolt, which resulted in the deaths of many white individuals, was a glaring example of the latent power and potential of the enslaved community when united against their oppressors. It offered a haunting preview of what could transpire if the enslaved in Mississippi were to undertake a similar path. In response to these amplified fears, the white leaders in Mississippi undertook rigorous measures to further curtail the freedoms and rights of the enslaved black population. The legal framework became more restrictive, curbing their ability to move freely, assemble, or even interact with each other without oversight. Penalties for perceived transgressions grew more brutal, including whippings, mutilations, and public executions. The intent was unmistakable: to serve as a deterrent, ensuring that the enslaved were constantly reminded of their place and the consequences of challenging it. Simultaneously, white Mississippians bolstered their vigilance mechanisms. Patrol systems, often composed of white working class and poor white volunteers, were ramped up to keep a relentless watch over black communities, deterring gatherings, intercepting communication, and swiftly punishing any signs of dissent. These measures, while a response to the fear of rebellion, also showcased the lengths to which the white elite would go to maintain their dominance, ensuring that the socio-economic structure of Mississippi, built on the backs of the enslaved, remained unchallenged. Mississippi, reflecting a broader trend across the American South, implemented a comprehensive system of slave codes, what later evolved into black codes, that served as a legal framework to enforce and perpetuate the institution of slavery. These regulations were not just about labor and property rights. They permeated every facet of an enslaved person's existence, underscoring the totality of their subjugation. The movement of enslaved people was severely restricted under these codes. Pass systems were introduced, wherein enslaved people needed written permission from their owners to travel, even for short distances. This mechanism not only prevented potential escape attempts, but also hindered communication between enslaved communities, making organization and collective action nearly impossible. Assembly of enslaved people was another significant concern for white Mississippians. To curb potential plotting or uprisings, the slave codes often prohibited gatherings of black individuals without the presence of white overseers. Religious gatherings, which were vital for the spiritual and emotional well-being of the enslaved, were viewed with particular suspicion. Many believed that such gatherings could serve as a cover for planning rebellions, leading to strict oversight and control of religious practices. Education posed another perceived threat to the institution of slavery. Knowledge, after all, has always been a potent tool for empowerment. Recognizing this, Mississippi's slave codes explicitly forbade the teaching of reading and writing to enslaved Black Americans. On December 1st, 1850, in Rochester, New York, Frederick Douglass delivered a speech titled "The Nature of Slavery." He underscored that even when dehumanized by their masters, slaves remained human. Douglass believed that one of the most empowering tools for a slave was the right to education. Said Douglass, "The great mass of slaveholders look upon education among the slaves as utterly subversive of the slave system. It is perfectly well understood in the South that to educate a slave is to make him discontented with slavery, and to invest him with a power which shall open to him the treasures of freedom. And since the object of the slaveholder is to maintain complete authority over his slave, his constant vigilance is exercised. Education, being among the menacing influence and perhaps the most dangerous, is therefore the most cautiously guarded against. As a general rule, then, darkness reigns over the abodes of the enslaved, and how great is that darkness?" The rationale was simple. An educated enslaved population was seen as more likely to question their condition, seek freedom, and inspire others to do the same. But these slave codes were not just passive laws on paper. Their enforcement was brutal and relentless. Violations, even minor ones, were met with disproportionate violence. Whippings were commonplace, often carried out in public to serve as a grim reminder to other enslaved people of the cost of disobedience. Brandings, which left permanent scars, were not just physical punishments, but also a way of marking the enslaved as perpetual property. In extreme cases, public executions were conducted, turning individual acts of defiance into spectacles of horror and warnings to the broader enslaved community. The objective of these punishments was twofold. First, they aimed to directly suppress any form of resistance or disobedience. Second, and perhaps more insidiously, they sought to embed a pervasive culture of fear among the enslaved, ensuring that the mere thought of defying the slave codes was fraught with danger and potential death. Through these codes and their brutal enforcement, Mississippi's white elite aimed to solidify their dominion over the enslaved, ensuring the continued prosperity of their plantation economy and preserving the racial hierarchies they had meticulously constructed. In periods marked by social upheaval and strict control, certain groups of people tend to sidestep official legal systems to exert their own brand of justice. A significant example of this was observed in the antebellum American South, where white citizens frequently bypassed legal channels, adopting a vigilantism approach. This self-appointed authority primarily stemmed from a desire to maintain an oppressive status quo over enslaved Black Americans. Patrol systems, commonly composed of local white men from various socioeconomic backgrounds, were instituted as a means to closely supervise the lives and movements of enslaved people. Their responsibilities often extended beyond simple oversight. They actively sought to curtail any form of congregation or communication among enslaved populations, fearing that such gatherings could lead to revolts or uprisings. Additionally, these patrols were tasked with tracking down and returning those who attempted to escape their bondage, further highlighting their central role in sustaining the institution of slavery. The modus operandi of these patrol groups was not subtle. Operating largely unchecked and without consequences for their actions, they frequently resorted to brutality. Acts of violence, public punishments, and psychological warfare were used as both corrective measures and preventive tactics. This not only ensured the subservience of the enslaved population in the immediate aftermath of such incidents, but also sowed seeds of fear and dread, dissuading potential acts of resistance or rebellion. The persistent climate of fear these patrols fostered was instrumental in upholding the oppressive system and deterring challenges to the prevailing social order. The antebellum era, characterized by its oppressive slave system, implemented multifaceted tactics that went beyond mere physical torment. Central to the machinery of control was the insidious application of psychological warfare, which aimed to break the will and resilience of enslaved Black Americans. One of the most heart-wrenching strategies employed involved the dissolution of enslaved families. Parents could be ripped away from their children, spouses from each other, and siblings separated, often with vast geographical distances between them, effectively severing any familial ties. By trading family members like mere commodities and ensuring that they were sent to disparate locations, slaveholders pursued two primary objectives. First, this separation acted as a lucrative enterprise. The sale of enslaved individuals was a significant source of income, and breaking up families ensured that each member could be sold to the highest bidder, maximizing profit. Second, on a more sinister note, there was a calculated psychological objective. The trauma and anguish of family separation were tools of emotional torture, leveraged to engender feelings of helplessness, despair, and isolation among the enslaved. The system of bondage bred a lecherous class of men and women, for slavery not only degraded the slaves, but also the master. In Frederick Douglass's narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, an American slave, the great abolitionist addressed the corrupting influence of slavery on the slaveholder. Speaking about one of his former mistresses, Mrs. Sophia Auld, Douglass wrote, "When I went there, she was a pious, warm, and tender-hearted woman. Slavery soon proved its ability to divest her of these heavenly qualities. Under its influence, the tender heart became stone, and the lamb-like disposition gave way to one of tiger-like fierceness." The transformation of Sophia Auld, as described by Douglass, was used to illustrate how the institution of slavery had the power to corrupt even those who might have initially been kind-hearted. Slavery, according to Douglass, wasn't just an institution that oppressed those who were enslaved. It morally bankrupted the oppressors as well. The fatal poison of irresponsible power was already in her hands and soon commenced its infernal work. Douglass wrote, "That cheerful eye, under the influence of slavery, soon became red with rage. That voice, made all of sweet accord, changed to one of harsh and horrid discord, and that angelic face gave place to that of a demon." In various writings and speeches, Douglass reiterated this point, emphasizing that the corrupting power of slavery affected everyone within its sphere, making it not only a tragedy for the enslaved, but also a moral blight on any who perpetuated and benefited from the system. In this deeply manipulative environment, the intention was clear: to erode the psychological fortitude of enslaved individuals, rendering them more malleable and easier to control. By stripping them of their most fundamental human connections, slaveholders wanted to dehumanize them further. Depriving them of their family ties and identity was a powerful means to cement their status as property, rather than as human beings with emotions, desires, and rights. This psychological warfare was a cornerstone of the system, ensuring the perpetuation of a submissive and compliant enslaved workforce, suppressed not just by chains, but by relentless emotional and mental trauma. Yet, amidst these adversities, slaves sought comfort in community, family bonds, and faith. Christianity played a significant role, with many finding solace in it. Secret religious meetings became both spiritual lifelines and crucial social gatherings. Despite the daily challenges, the spirit of resistance and hope for a better future persisted among many slaves. During the antebellum period in Mississippi, enslaved Black Americans faced especially oppressive conditions, given the state's deep-rooted reliance on the cotton economy. Yet despite this environment, they crafted numerous ways to resist. Subtle acts of defiance were a common form of resistance among those working in Mississippi's cotton fields. Slaves might deliberately work at a slower pace, pretend to be ill, damage tools, or pretend to misunderstand commands. While such actions didn't pose overt threats, they disrupted the typical plantation routine and served as silent protests. Additionally, the rich cultural landscape of Mississippi became an avenue for resistance. The foundations of the Mississippi Delta blues, characterized by its deep, soulful tones, can be traced back to the songs, dances, and stories of this period, which were expressions of pain, hope, and resilience. Mississippi's geography also played a role in resistance. Its expansive wilderness and swamps provided temporary sanctuaries for those brave enough to escape their captors. While the Underground Railroad was more prominent further north, some slaves in Mississippi managed to escape to neighboring states or hid in the state's more remote areas, forming secret communities known as Maroons. Discussions of rebellion, inspired by uprisings elsewhere, circulated covertly among enslaved communities. Even if these talks didn't always lead to action, they were a form of psychological resistance, reminding slaves that the desire for freedom was widespread. The power of education was not lost on the enslaved either. Despite the severe consequences and the fact it was illegal, some slaves secretly learned to read and write, allowing them to access abolitionist literature, forge passes, and communicate covertly. Within the intricate societal web of Mississippi's plantations, slaves built covert networks to share vital information, from news of impending sales or punishments to plans for escape. There were also instances of direct confrontation, where slaves, risking everything, physically defended themselves or challenged the authority of overseers and owners. In the face of overwhelming adversity, the enslaved in Mississippi consistently found ways to assert their humanity and challenge their subjugation. The origins of racial terror in Mississippi's antebellum era were deeply intertwined with the state's economic, social, and political structures. The systemic brutality faced by Black people was not just the product of individual prejudices, but was a state-sanctioned mechanism to maintain white supremacy and economic dominance. Recognizing this context is crucial to understanding the state's history and the enduring legacies of racial terror and discrimination that persisted long after the Civil War. This has been 400 Years. Thank you for joining us on this journey of exploration into the heroic struggle for freedom and justice.
All right, so the mystery state was indeed Mississippi. Now, why did I think that it was Mississippi? I'm gonna tell you why I thought it was Mississippi initially. Because Mississippi has such a horrible history and a checkered present that there was a time when if I thought about if the United States would give us our own plot of area in this particular country, and you're gonna have this area, we're gonna have this area, and they give us the southern states, from wherever you want to say down. And I thought, well, we couldn't keep Mississippi. Mississippi has such a horrible past. It couldn't be Mississippi anymore. We'd have to change the name. I said, we'd have to call it New Hope. That'd have to be the name of the, because that's how bad it is. It's so bad that the very name it's uncomfortable. I was driving at one point from Arkansas to and Arkansas is not much better, but I was driving at one point to Arkansas to Georgia. Georgia's not much better. I mean, you got Atlanta, of course, but the history is still there. But when I was driving, I put the address I was going to at my GPS, and it just took me. I followed it. I was just following what it said. And I looked up and saw a sign that said, "Welcome to Mississippi." And I mean, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up.
Come on.
Yeah, it is it's a terrible place to imagine. I can't imagine somebody purposely going to Mississippi for anything outside of want to help somebody. You know what I'm saying? Because we know our people are there, and that would be the only legitimate reason to go. But this was an interesting video. He was a bit wordy, which I think stretched it out because his explanation was reasonable and good information, but he he used a lot of words. I noticed that. So, but go ahead, Ak, what you got on it?
Very informative. Well, another informative video. I wasn't sure what state that this could have been referring to. Am I surprised? Not in the least or least bit surprised about hearing about Mississippi. My parents, well, my father especially, grew up in rural West Tennessee, which might as well been Mississippi. The same families, literally the same families that are in West Tennessee are the same families in northern Mississippi, other parts of Mississippi. So I know I hear stories about how it was. My brother actually grew up 15 minutes north of Corinth, Mississippi. He was grew up in Tennessee, but just 15 minutes north of Mississippi, and just hearing his take. Like you said, it wasn't somewhere that a desired location. It wasn't somewhere that that they went to hang out. And like other spots in the South, we know what has happened there. We know that many of our people were lynched in these states, like Mississippi, Alabama. I remember riding through parts of Alabama as a 11-year-old. My father driving and my mother in the passenger seat, my sister in the seat behind them, and then me in the very back of the van. And my father has instructed me to keep my hand on the pistol as we ride through Alabama. So and my instructions were to shoot through the window. And we're gonna drive off. So this was a very real ordeal when it comes to the things that the quality of life for our people. Try not to be too long-winded. I'm slacking. My fault about that.
No, you good.
But that's all I got.
No, you good on that, Ak. And I tell you, when I saw that sign, like I said, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and my thought was, I will not stop. I'm not stopping until I'm up out of here. And I honestly felt, and maybe it was me being a little paranoid, I honestly felt that these cars were trying to box me in. You know what I'm saying? Like one car was in the front, another car pulled up on the side, another car pulled up on the back. I'm like, hell no. My first opportunity, I hit the gas and I was out of there. And this is before I thought it okay to pack, to be packing everywhere I go. Now I don't give a doggone where I go. I'm ready.
Yeah, so, right.
You know what I'm saying? So I ain't playing them games, but I don't know. They could have just been a coincidence, or I was and the people that was driving, they was white people. I'm like, what have I got myself into? Here I was literally trying to go and meet some people in the truth. So interesting enough. All right. With that being said, we're gonna shift a little bit. We're getting to know a little bit about 400 Years Unleashed, but we're gonna shift with the climate that we're carrying, and we're gonna jump to a Black Journals video real quick, and we'll come back to this Dahomey video. That's gonna be interesting. I'm interested in knowing about that one. But this video kind of go along with the theme that we've been following. The days of Jim Crow, gone or still alive? That's the question that they asked. So let's get to it. It's gonna be an interesting one. I did watch this one earlier, so yeah, it's interesting, but man, it's not pretty. It's not pretty. It's not a video that's gonna make you smile. So, all right, here we go.
On June 7, 1892, Homer Plessy walked into the Press Street Depot in New Orleans, bought a first-class ticket to Covington, and boarded the East Louisiana Railroad's No. 8 train. As the train pulled away from the station, the conductor asked the light-complected Plessy if he was a colored man. Plessy said he was, and the conductor told him to move to the colored car. Homer Plessy refused.
I am an American citizen. I have paid for a first-class ticket and intend to ride to Covington in the first-class car,
he told the trainman. The conductor stopped the train, and Detective Christopher Kane boarded the car, arrested Plessy, and forcibly dragged him off the train with the help of a few other passengers. After a night in jail, Plessy appeared in criminal court before Judge John Howard Ferguson to answer charges of violating the Separate Car Act. The committee to test the constitutionality of the Separate Car Act then posted a $500 bond so Plessy could be released, after which the extensive legal maneuvers began. Plessy was not arraigned until October 1892, being 4 months after his arrest, and the trio of attorneys, Martinet, Walker, and Tourget, entered a plea claiming that the act was unconstitutional, and therefore the court did not have jurisdiction to hear or determine the facts. And they claimed that the matter of race, both as to fact and to law, was too complicated to permit the legislature to assign that determination to a railway conductor. Plessy failed in court, and his subsequent appeal to the state Supreme Court in Ex parte Plessy, 1893, was similarly unsuccessful. An appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court followed, but time was hardly on Plessy's side. Between the filing of the appeal in 1893 and oral argument before the U.S. Supreme Court in Washington in April 1896, both the general climate and the attitude of the court had hardened. Throughout the country, but especially in the South, conditions for African Americans were quickly deteriorating. The Supreme Court ruling that followed on May 18, 1896, and that bore the names of Plessy and Ferguson, solidified the establishment of the Jim Crow era. As painful and disappointing as this development was, it was not the first time that efforts of the segregation activists were to suffer the same fate. An earlier attempt, which commenced on February 24, 1892, when the then 21-year-old Daniel Desdunes purchased a first-class ticket on the Louisville and Nashville from New Orleans to Mobile, Alabama, had ended the same way, though for slightly different but similar legal reasons. Desdunes had taken a seat in the whites-only car, according to the plan, for which he was arrested and charged with a criminal violation of the Separate Car Act. Tourget, Martinet, and the local attorney, James Walker, filed a plea of jurisdiction, arguing that since Desdunes was a passenger in interstate commerce, he had the right and privilege to travel free from any governmental regulation, save that of the Congress. Tourget also introduced his claim that the determination of race was a complex question of both science and law, and so could not be delegated to a train official. The lawyers assumed that their plea would be denied, Desdunes would be convicted, and then they would appeal. Then, on April 19, 1892, the presiding judge, Robert Marr, suddenly disappeared, and no one knew what had happened to him. While Desdunes' attorney tried to figure out what to do next, on May 25th, the Louisiana Supreme Court handed down its decision in Louisiana ex Ariel Abbott vs. Hicks. A train conductor on the Texas and Pacific Railway had been prosecuted for seating a black passenger in a white car, and the railway argued that since the passenger was traveling between two states, either the Louisiana law did not apply to interstate travel, or if it did, then it was unconstitutional under the Commerce Clause. Much to everyone's surprise, the Louisiana High Court agreed that regulations of the Separate Car Act could not apply to interstate passengers. Given that development, the new judge in Desdunes' case, John Ferguson, dismissed the case. Around the same period, segregation activists in different parts of the American South and beyond were challenging legislations in their local domains up to the Supreme Court. but the Plessy ruling of 1896 was the straw that broke the camel's back. Both Plessy and Desdunes would definitely have thanked their creator that they were not even lynched, as that was the order of the day during the era. With almost 5,000 of such known lynchings, involving black men and women as victims within the period. And so began the mockery and slur that historically became the Jim Crow era. But wait a minute, how did the name or term Jim Crow come about? Before we delve into this, support our work by kindly hitting the thumb button. Share with friends and families to keep spreading our eye-opening Black narrative. And subscribe to stay with us for more interesting and revealing videos. Now, back on track.
All links in the description box.
Imagine a bold inscription at the entrance of a pub, hotels and accommodations and more, reading, "No dogs, colored or Mexican," or "Colored served in rear," or in Jim Crow, Montgomery County, Maryland, where it was easier for white folks' pets to get a respectful burial than it was for the county's African Americans. The indignity was compounded when you factor in the conditions of many black cemeteries in Montgomery County versus the Aspen Hill Pet Cemetery. Even till date, in the 21st century, from the late 1870s until the triumphs of the civil rights movement in the 1950s and 60s, regimented racial segregation blighted America's water fountains, restrooms, restaurants, lodging, and transportation, along with separate but equal schools. All of these were legally sanctioned by the U.S. Supreme Court, Plessy versus Ferguson, 1896, and codified by so-called Jim Crow laws. It is not clear how Jim Crow, the character that popularized blackface minstrelsy in the 19th century, became associated with these laws, but the use of this symbol says everything about the nature and intention of the laws. The character of Jim Crow is thought to have been first presented about 1830 by Thomas Dartmouth, Daddy Rice, an itinerant white actor. Rice was not the first performer to don rags and use burnt cork to blacken his face to present a mocking, exaggerated imitation of an African American, but he was the most famous, and his success helped establish minstrelsy as a popular theatrical form that thrived from about 1850 to 1870. Rice first introduced the character who would become known as Jim Crow between acts of a play called The Kentucky Rifle.
I want you to think about what's in your mind, what your Akazaki Yahoo would like to do to this guy. You know, let's think about that. If Akazaki Yahoo was able to meet this fella face to face, and he was doing this bit, what would you expect to happen? Just think about that. Back to the show.
In which he performed a ludicrous off-balance dance while singing Jump Jim Crow, which described his actions: wheel about and turn about and do just so. Every time I wheel about, I jump Jim Crow. He portrayed the character principally as a dim-witted buffoon. In the process, Rice not only created the template for other staple minstrel show characters, but he also fed on, heightened, and popularized pernicious stereotypes of African Americans, even as his presentation reflected white fascination with black culture. By the late 1830s, Jim Crow had become a pejorative epithet for African Americans, though arguably it was neither as pervasive nor as hostilely derisive as some other terms. Its adoption in the late 19th century as the identifier for the laws that reinstated white supremacy in the American South after Reconstruction speaks to the ways in which the demeaning caricature was used to legitimize notions of the alleged inferiority of African Americans and to rationalize the denial of equity and access that was at the heart of segregation. Jim Crow was the name of the racial caste system which operated primarily, but not exclusively, in southern and border states between 1870s and the mid-1960s. Jim Crow was more than a series of rigid anti-black laws. It was a way of life. Under Jim Crow, African Americans were relegated to the status of second-class citizens. Jim Crow represented the legitimization of anti-black racism. Many Christian ministers and theologians taught that white people were the chosen people. Black people were cursed to be servants, and God supported racial segregation. Craniologists, eugenicists, phrenologists, and social Darwinists at every educational level buttressed the belief that Black people were innately, intellectually, and culturally inferior to white people. Pro-segregation politicians gave eloquent speeches on the great danger of integration, the mongrelization of the white race. Newspaper and magazine writers routinely referred to Black people as niggers, coons, and darkies. And worse, their articles reinforced anti-Black stereotypes. Even children's games portrayed Black people as inferior beings. All major societal institutions reflected and supported the oppression of Black people. The Jim Crow system was undergirded by the following beliefs or rationalizations. White people were superior to Black people in all important ways, including but not limited to intelligence, morality, and civilized behavior. Sexual relations between Black people and white people would produce a mongrel race which would destroy America. Treating Black people as equals would encourage interracial sexual unions. Any activity which suggested social equality encouraged interracial sexual relations. If necessary, violence must be used to keep Black people at the bottom of the racial hierarchy. The following Jim Crow etiquette norms show how inclusive and pervasive these norms were. A Black male could not offer his hand to shake hands with a white male because it implied being socially equal. Obviously, a Black male could not offer his hand or any other part of his body to a white woman because he risked being accused of rape. Black and white people were not supposed to eat together. If they did eat together, white people were to be served first, and some sort of partition was to be placed between them. Under no circumstance was a Black male to offer to light the cigarette of a white female. That gesture implied intimacy. Black people were not allowed to show public affection toward one another in public, especially kissing, because it offended white people. Jim Crow etiquette prescribed that Black people were introduced to white people, never white people to Black people. For example, Mr. Peters, the white person. This is Charlie, the Black person that I spoke to you about. White people did not use courtesy titles of respect when referring to Black people. For example, Mr., Mrs., Miss, Sir, or Ma'am. Instead, Black people were called by their first names. Black people had to use courtesy titles when referring to white people and were not allowed to call them by their first names. If a Black person rode in a car driven by a white person, the Black person sat in the back seat or the back of a truck. White motorists had the right of way at all intersections. Stetson Kennedy, the author of Jim Crow Guide, offered these simple rules that Black people were supposed to observe in conversing with white people. Never assert or even intimate that a white person is lying. Never impute dishonorable intentions to a white person. Never suggest that a white person is from an inferior class. Never lay claim to or overly demonstrate superior knowledge or intelligence. Never curse a white person. Never laugh derisively at a white person. Never comment upon the appearance of a white female. Jim Crow etiquette operated in conjunction with Jim Crow laws or Black codes. What should a rational-minded human being need all these for? There is no rationality in them at all. When most people think of Jim Crow, they think of laws, not the Jim Crow etiquette, which excluded Black people from public transport and facilities, juries, jobs, and neighborhoods. But both were strongly in effect despite the passage of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the Constitution that had granted Black people the same legal protections as white people. However, after 1877 and the election of Republican Rutherford B. Hayes, Southern and border states began restricting the liberties of Black people. Unfortunately for Black people, the Supreme Court helped undermine the constitutional protections of Black people with the infamous Plessy versus Ferguson 1896 case, which legitimized Jim Crow laws and the Jim Crow way of life. In 1890, Louisiana passed the Separate Car Law, which purported to aid passenger comfort by creating equal but separate cars for Black and white people. This was a ruse. No public accommodations, including railway travel, provided Black people with equal facilities. The Louisiana law made it illegal for Black people to sit in coach seats reserved for white people, and white people could not sit in seats reserved for Black people. Jim Crow states passed statutes severely regulating social interactions between the races. Jim Crow signs were placed above water fountains, door entrances and exits, and in front of public facilities. There were separate hospitals for Black people and white people, prisons, public and private schools, churches, cemeteries, public restrooms, and separate public accommodations. In most instances, the Black facilities were grossly inferior, generally older, less well kept. In other cases, there were no Black facilities. No colored public restrooms, no public beach, no place to sit or eat. Plessy ruling gave Jim Crow states a legal way to ignore their constitutional obligations to their black citizens. Jim Crow laws touched every aspect of everyday life, even to the minutest of people's personal, social, and official activities and engagements. For example, in 1935, Oklahoma prohibited black and white people from boating together. Boating implied social equality. In 1905, Georgia established separate parks for black people and white people. In 1930, Birmingham, Alabama, made it illegal for black people and white to play checkers or dominoes together. Many today, and especially recent generations, may not readily grasp how life-altering, demeaning, and inhumane these segregation laws and etiquettes were. Look deeply at your daily life events and lifestyle today. Now let's do a deep imagination. Imagine having restrictions placed on that lifestyle by some of the typical Jim Crow laws, as compiled by the Martin Luther King Jr. National Historic Site Interpretive Staff. Amateur baseball. Georgia. It shall be unlawful for any amateur white baseball team to play baseball on any vacant lot or baseball diamond within 2 blocks of a playground devoted to the Negro race. And it shall be unlawful for any amateur colored baseball team to play baseball in any vacant lot or baseball diamond within 2 blocks of any playground devoted to the white race. Barbers. Georgia. No colored barber shall serve as a barber to white women or girls. Bathroom facilities. Alabama. Every employer of white or Negro males shall provide for such white or Negro males reasonably accessible and separate toilet facilities. The blind. Louisiana. The Board of Trustees shall maintain a separate building on separate ground for the admission, care, instruction, and support of all blind persons of the colored or black race. Burial. Georgia. The officer in charge shall not bury or allow to be buried any colored persons upon ground set apart or used for the burial of white persons. Buses. Alabama. All passenger stations in this state operated by any motor transportation company shall have separate waiting rooms or space and separate ticket windows for the white and colored races. Child custody. South Carolina. It shall be unlawful for any parent, relative, or other white person in this state having the control or custody of any white child by right of guardianship, natural or acquired or otherwise, to dispose of, give or surrender such white child permanently into the custody, control, maintenance, or support of a Negro. Circus tickets. Louisiana. All circuses, shows, and tent exhibitions to which the attendance of more than one race is invited or expected to attend shall provide for the convenience of its patrons not less than 2 ticket offices with individual ticket sellers, and not less than 2 entrances to the said performance with individual ticket takers and receivers, and in the case of outside or tent performances, the said ticket offices shall not be less than 25 feet apart. Cohabitation. Florida. Any Negro man and white woman, or any white man and Negro woman, who are not married to each other, who shall habitually live in and occupy in the nighttime, the same room shall each be punished by imprisonment not exceeding 12 months, or by fine not exceeding $500. By the way, $500 was not a small amount in that era. Many went to prison for being unable to make the fine. Education. Education was perhaps the worst hit. Florida. The schools for white children and the schools for Negro children shall be conducted separately. Mississippi. Separate schools shall be maintained for the children of the white and colored races. Missouri. Separate free schools shall be established for the education of children of African descent, and it shall be unlawful for any colored child to attend any white school, or any white child to attend a colored school. New Mexico. Separate rooms shall be provided for the teaching of pupils of African descent, and when said rooms are so provided, such pupils may not be admitted to the schoolrooms occupied and used by pupils of Caucasian or other descent. Texas, the County Board of Education shall provide schools of 2 kinds, those for white children and those for colored children. Fishing, boating, and bathing. Oklahoma, the Conservation Commission shall have the right to make segregation of the white and colored races as to the exercise of rights of fishing, boating, and bathing. Hospital entrances. Mississippi. There shall be maintained by the governing authorities of every hospital maintained by the state for treatment of white and colored patients, separate entrances for white and colored patients and visitors, and such entrances shall be used by the race only for which they are prepared. Housing. Louisiana, any person who shall rent any part of any such building to a Negro person or a Negro family when such building is already in whole or in part in occupancy by a white person or white family, or vice versa when the building is in occupancy by a Negro person or Negro family, shall be guilty of a misdemeanor, and on conviction thereof shall be punished by a fine of not less than $25, nor more than $100, or be imprisoned not less than 10 or more than 60 days, or both such fine and imprisonment in the discretion of the court. Intermarriage was yet another of such widespread segregated component across many states. Arizona, the marriage of a person of Caucasian blood with a Negro, Mongolian, Malay, or Hindu shall be null and void. Florida, all marriages between a white person and a Negro, or between a white person and a person of Negro descent to the fourth generation inclusive, are hereby forever prohibited. Georgia, it shall be unlawful for a white person to marry anyone except a white person. Any marriage in violation of this section shall be void. Maryland, all marriages between a white person and a Negro, or between a white person and a person of Negro descent to the third generation inclusive, or between a white person and a member of the Malay race, or between the Negro, and a member of the Malay race, or between a person of Negro descent to the third generation inclusive and a member of the Malay race, are forever prohibited and shall be void. Mississippi, the marriage of a white person with a Negro or mulatto, or person who shall have 1/8 or more of Negro blood, shall be unlawful and void. Missouri, all marriages between white persons and Negroes, or white persons and Mongolians, are prohibited and declared absolutely void. No person having 1/8 part or more of Negro blood shall be permitted to marry any white person, nor shall any white person be permitted to marry any Negro or person having 1/8 part or more of Negro blood. Wyoming, all marriages of white persons with Negroes, mulattoes, Mongolians, or Malaya hereafter contracted in the state of Wyoming are and shall be illegal and void. Juvenile delinquents, Florida. There shall be separate buildings, not nearer than 1/4 mile to each other, one for white boys and one for Negro boys. White boys and Negro boys shall not in any manner be associated together or work together. Libraries. North Carolina. The state librarian is directed to fit up and maintain a separate place for the use of the colored people who may come to the library for the purpose of reading books or periodicals. Texas. Any white person of such county may use the county free library under the rules and regulations prescribed by the Commissioner's Court and may be entitled to all the privileges thereof. Said court shall make proper provision for the Negroes of said county to be served through a separate branch or branches of the county free library, which shall be administered by a custodian of the Negro race under the supervision of the county librarian. Lunch counters, South Carolina. No persons, firms, or corporations who or which furnish meals to passengers at station restaurants or station eating houses in times limited by common carriers of said passengers shall furnish said meals to white and colored passengers in the same room or at the same table or at the same counter. Mental hospitals. Georgia. The Board of Control shall see that proper and distinct apartments are arranged for said patients, so that in no case shall Negroes and white persons be together. Militia, North Carolina. The white and colored militia shall be separately enrolled and shall never be compelled to serve in the same organization. No organization of colored troops shall be permitted where white troops are available, and while white permitted to be organized, colored troops shall be under the command of white officers. Mining, Oklahoma. The baths and lockers for the Negroes shall be separate from the white race, but may be in the same building. Nurses, Alabama. No person or corporation shall require any white female nurse to nurse in wards or rooms in hospitals, either public or private, in which Negro men are placed. Parks, Georgia. It shall be unlawful for colored people to frequent any park owned or maintained by the city for the benefit, use, and enjoyment of white persons, and unlawful for any white person to frequent any park owned or maintained by the city for the use and benefit of colored persons. Pool and billiard rooms, Alabama. It shall be unlawful for a Negro and white person to play together or in company with each other at any game of pool or billiards. Prisons. Mississippi. The warden shall see that the white convicts shall have separate apartments for both eating and sleeping from the Negro convicts. Promotion of equality. Any person who shall be guilty of printing, publishing, or circulating printed, typewritten, or written matter urging or presenting for public acceptance or general information, arguments or suggestions in favor of social equality or of intermarriage between whites and Negroes, shall be guilty of a misdemeanor and subject to fine or not exceeding $500 or imprisonment not exceeding 6 months or both. Once again, note the $500 fine. Obviously, the system was prejudiced. The system wanted to take many black people out of circulation, behind bars, or are we reading meaning from such a small amount? Railroads, Alabama. The conductor of each passenger train is authorized and required to assign each passenger to the car or the division of the car when it is divided by a partition designated for the race to which such passenger belongs. Maryland, all railroad companies and corporations, and all persons running or operating cars or coaches by steam on any railroad line or track in the state of Maryland for the transportation of passengers are hereby required to provide separate cars or coaches for the travel and transportation of the white and colored passengers. Virginia, the conductors or managers on all such railroads shall have power and are hereby required to assign to each white or colored passenger his or her respective car, coach, or compartment. If the passenger fails to disclose his race, the conductor and managers acting in good faith shall be the sole judges of his race. Reform schools. Kentucky. The children of white and colored races committed to the houses of reform shall be kept entirely separate from each other. Restaurants, Alabama. It shall be unlawful to conduct a restaurant or other place for the serving of food in the city, at which white and colored people are served in the same room, unless such white and colored persons are effectually separated by a solid partition extending from the floor upward to a distance of 7 feet or higher, and unless a separate entrance from the street is provided for each compartment. Georgia. All persons licensed to conduct a restaurant shall serve either white people exclusively or colored people exclusively, and shall not sell to the two races within the same room or serve the two races anywhere under the same license. Teaching, Oklahoma. Any instructor who shall teach in any school, college, or institution where members of the white and colored race are received and enrolled as pupils for instruction shall be deemed guilty of a misdemeanor, and upon conviction thereof shall be fined in any sum not less than $10 nor more than $50 for each offense. Telephone booths, Oklahoma. The Corporation Commission is hereby vested with power and authority to require telephone companies to maintain separate booths for white and colored patrons when there is a demand for such separate booths. That the Corporation Commission shall determine the necessity for said separate booths only upon complaint of the people in the town and vicinity to be served after due hearing, as now provided by law in other complaints filed with the Corporation Commission. Textbooks, North Carolina. Books shall not be interchangeable between the white and colored schools, but shall continue to be used by the race first using them. Theaters, Virginia. Every person operating any public hall, theater, opera house, motion picture show, or any place of public entertainment or public assemblage which is attended by both white and colored persons shall separate the white race and the colored race, and shall set apart and designate certain seats therein to be occupied by white persons, and a portion thereof, or certain seats therein to be occupied by colored persons. Wait a minute, what aspect of one's daily life is yet unhampered? Yet, violation was not smiled at nor waved aside. When law enforcement was not readily available to handle the situation, supremacy enforcement took charge. The Jim Crow laws and system of etiquette were undergirded by violence, real and threatened. Black people who violated Jim Crow norms, for example, drinking from the white water fountain or trying to vote, risked their homes, their jobs, even their lives. White people could physically beat black people with impunity. Black people had little legal recourse against these assaults because the Jim Crow criminal justice system was all white. Police, prosecutors, judges, juries, and prison officials. Violence was instrumental for Jim Crow. It was a method of social control. The most extreme forms of Jim Crow violence were lynchings. Lynchings were public, often sadistic, murders carried out by mobs. Between 1882, when the first reliable data were collected, and 1968, when lynchings had become rare, there were 4,730 known lynchings, including 3,440 black men and women. Most of the victims of lynch law were hanged or shot, but some were burned at the stake, castrated, beaten with clubs, or dismembered. Lynching was used as an intimidation tool to keep black people, in this case the newly freed people, in their places. Think you have heard the worst of this dark era? Then you are obviously in for a surprise. Going forward, do keep a date with us on this channel for the second part of this discussion. Until then, look among our videos for more interesting and informative ones. We got a whole lot of them for your viewing pleasure. This brings us to the end of yet another revealing video. Do kindly to like, share, and subscribe.
All right. Just got to take a deep breath on that one. That is, I was really relevant, not to the last video, but to the video before that one. And I just didn't want to break up the culmination of the other video. Interesting enough, Instagram has flagged the video for, this is the second time this has happened. So they're using some kind of a robot to monitor things, and the robots, yeah. So they say, oh, so they apologized the first time they did it, and they're gonna apologize this time as well. And they need to turn that robot off my channel because I'm not doing no evil stuff. This is all for the edification of my people. As far as this last video goes, man, it's hard to not just be so triggered, by such a video, by such a information coming forth. But man, it's really no profit in that. Now, here's the thing. There's no profit in being triggered. However, the scripture teaches us to be angry, but sin not. So just because we need to know this information. We need to understand these things. Because here today, our people are so disconnected from reality that they'll scoff at this type of information. And that's sad. That's a sad existence, to think that your own people would think nothing of this situation, of these situations, I should say. He did a magnificent job of outlining how Jim Crow grossly affected our people in virtually every state where it was prevalent. And to bring out the origin of Jim Crow and where it came from. Some sadistic, wicked Japhite, probably Javon's son, playing a dang costume of so-called black people and putting this stuff on his face. I mean, that's so horrible. Yeah, so, but we need to know these things. We need to understand these things, and it should repulse you. It should revile you. You should be angered by it. Is that now? Am I saying, hey, go out and punish these people? No, I'm not saying that. Because as we were getting in the other video, before we came on, actually, we were having a conversation, and I was talking about the movie. What was the name of it?
Emperor.
Emperor. Let me flash it on the screen right quick. So this movie, we were talking a little bit about. Interesting movie. It's on Stars right now. So it highlighted the history of Frederick Douglass, some of Frederick Douglass and John Brown. And it talked about, situations where this main character here came in contact with those two guys, and what they were doing or what ended up happening. So if you're not privy to that, then you should definitely check it out. Very good information. The point of the matter is we're not in a position to deal with this nation's army. So it would be foolish to go up against them hand to hand, bullet to bullet, because we can't win. You can't win that way. Now, when Mashiach come back and we are changed into something completely different, that's when it's gonna go into our favor. When we get our not these fleshly bodies, but we get our next level bodies, our celestial bodies. I think that's the right. Is that the right term, celestial?
No, it's glorified.
Yeah, so the glorified. Yeah. So it's celestial, terrestrial, and I don't know. They was talking about that, but I might have that incorrect. But the glorified bodies that won't require sleep, that basically you can't damage. That's when we can go up against in anything, and it won't be. We won't have to worry. So that's when the time will be, and that's when the Most High will deem as our time has come. So right now on that movie, it ended with them doing their best combat, but yet the army was able to overcome them very easily, even though they had weapons and ammunition, and it literally lasted a matter of minutes, and they were able to overcome them. So, I mean, I don't know if that was it in reality, but that's what the movie depicted, that they were able to overcome them just very quickly and easily. So, but that's really all I got on that video. That know the history, understand it, but don't let it drag you down. It is not to drag us down. It's to edify us so that we are aware of the situations, and we know that we have every reason to have our heads up, to feel good about ourselves, not because of pride, not because of arrogance, but because the promise is above everything else. And that's why you can walk around with your head up and still be humble, because you have the promise of the Most High that He's going to restore our people. So that's all I got. Go ahead.
Land backing off of you. It's funny that you say that, because I was thinking about that yesterday. After the work week was completed, it being a difficult week, but I believe it's Yirmiyahu 49, I believe, where it's the restoration of So Yeshayahu chapter 49, beginning at verse 14, it reads, "But Zion said, Yahweh hath forsaken me, my Adonai hath forgotten me. Can a woman forget her sucking child, that she should not have compassion on the son of her womb? Yea, they may forget, yet will I not forget you." So this is the Most High promising Yasharal that He's not going to forsake us, not going to forget us. We get into other prophecies of this book, and He has plans to do us well, but we got to do our part as well. But indeed, it is a very joyful thing to know that we serve the power of Abraham, Isaac, and Yasharal, and that we be his sons, set apart people for His good pleasure, right? All these videos are hard to watch. Well, a lot of these videos are hard to watch, but they're also evidence of who we are. Devarim chapter 28, verse 46, I believe it says that 46 through 47 that these curses would be a sign upon us, right? Indeed. So that's the way that we look at these videos. Hard to watch, but also confirmation. All praises to the Most High.
Hallelujah, hallelujah. All praises indeed. Khan. All right, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna end off with this last video for today, and this is the real story of the mighty kingdom of Dahomey, not the movie. This is the real story. So interesting stuff. I have not previewed this video as well. Looking forward to it. Let's get to it. Let's do it.
To 400 years, a channel that explores Black history, heritage, and perspectives. We are dedicated to remembering and reclaiming our past through meaningful discussions. Join us as we shine a light on the often overlooked narratives that have been silenced, suppressed, or ignored, from the haunting legacy of the Atlantic slave trade to the profound impact of Black literature and Black culture. In this episode, we're delving into a captivating era of African history. Prepare to discover the untold tale of the mighty kingdom of Dahomey, a realm of immense power, vibrant traditions, and extraordinary warriors. Our main focus is on the fearless Dahomey Amazons, the warrior queens who defied expectations and left an indelible mark on history. Get ready to dive deep into their remarkable story and unravel the captivating secrets of the Kingdom of Dahomey. Join us on this enlightening journey as we explore the rich tapestry of Black history and celebrate the resilience, strength, and triumphs of our ancestors. Welcome to 400 Years. The Kingdom of Dahomey thrived from around 1600 to 1904 in what we now call Benin, a country located in West Africa. The land was first settled by the Fon people, an ethnic group that still exists to this day. They made their home on the Dahomey Plateau and even had a king ruling over them. But it wasn't until their third king, Huegbaja, took the throne in 1645 that things really kicked into high gear. That's when the kingdom started to organize and amp up their power. Under the influence of Huegbaja, Dahomey established a strong foundation for administration and religious practices. Their dominant religion, known as Vodun, thrived as they pursued the necessary steps for establishing dominance and authority, which included conquering neighboring territories. Dahomey flourished under Huegbaja, laying the groundwork for effective administration and the development of a rich religious tradition. Huegbaja's reign marked a significant turning point in Dahomey's history, as he implemented various measures that consolidated power and solidified the kingdom's authority.
Slav, did you see what he was sitting under? The king.
I missed it. Let me go back up. Oh, what in the world is that?
Well, yeah, Khan. Indeed, good point. Like right there, but that wasn't what I was talking about. The scene before this one, shortly before this one.
Let me know if he.
Oh, right here. Okay. So, what is this that these people have built? That he's sitting under. This is a Sakot. This is a booth that has been constructed out of whatever goodly trees that they had in that area. But this is a booth that has been constructed. So what I'm doing is just helping the audience identify, who these people are, who these people truly are. A lot of their color schemes would often be scarlet, purple, and blue. So, that's another indication of who these people are. But we can continue out.
Con. Look, I didn't pick up this. They got these people over here. And they go with bear. They don't. That's not. I don't know what that. That's ironic to be like that. But let's continue.
And the development of a rich religious tradition. Huegbaja's reign marked a significant turning point in Dahomey's history, as he implemented various measures that consolidated power and solidified the kingdom's authority. One of the notable aspects of Dahomey under Huegbaja was the thriving practice of their dominant religion, Vodun. Vodun, also known as voodoo, played a central role in the daily lives of the Dahomey people. It encompassed a diverse array of spiritual beliefs, rituals, and practices that were deeply intertwined with their cultural identity. The veneration of ancestral spirits, deities, and the forces of nature were key components of Vodun, fostering a strong sense of community and religious devotion among the Dahomey people. However, alongside religious practices, Huegbaja recognized the importance of territorial expansion for establishing dominance and authority in the region.
Yep.
You know, I don't want to pretend to be an expert on voodoo, because I'm not. But you know, I know that it has to deal with the sacrificing of certain animals. So, you know, if we were to read parts of where we call Leviticus, it would probably read like a ceremony of voodoo, you know.
Oh, wow. So they did they sacrifice mostly clean animals?
Indeed, the cockatrice, the lamb, the ram, indeed. Now they would also, you know, sacrifice, you know, unclean animals as well, I believe, but you know, I'm not certain, but and the reason, you know, I was a part of a study before years ago, and you know, they talked about how, you know, we were reading Leviticus, and you know, this person drew a parallel between what was going on, what we were reading in that chapter, and what happens with different ceremonies of voodoo.
Okay, that's interesting, because I never delved into it. And what I'm noticing about our people, and with this understanding of truth, that, you know, we know. I'm trying to think his second. I think it's 1 Samuel, where he talks about the Most High is a power of knowledge, and so that alone, you know, eliminates the need to be ignorant, because we don't have to not know about these things. In fact, we do need to know. And our brothers have taken extraordinary measures to learn about these other religions, these man-made religions, and be able to you know, disassemble them. Like this has no merit. There's nothing to stand on here. And you know, brothers have done dynamically in understanding Islam, and even delving into the history of Christianity and the history of some of these other religions our people have been caught up into, and yeah, just to prove that, hey, this is not for you. This is not for you, so-called black man. You know, this is your destruction here. This is not your salvation or your restitution. So interesting. I haven't heard much about voodoo or anybody get into voodoo. I don't think, because it's not prevalent here as much as it would be in other places. But I wonder if brothers in like Louisiana, if they deal more along that lines, or in is it Jamaica or Haiti? It's Haiti that deal mostly with voodoo, right?
Yeah,
yeah. So I wonder if brothers in Haiti are dealing more along that lines, and kind of delving into that. But information is available, so yeah, we definitely can get into it and kind of see what the makeup is, and what the, you know, what historically it represented. So interesting. You know, it's a lot of that there in Haiti. It's a lot of that in on the continent as well, in Kebulon. So you know, keeping those things in mind, that's something we can definitely get into. So let's continue here.
Dahomey embarked on a series of military campaigns, conquering neighboring territories and absorbing them into the expanding kingdom. These conquests not only extended Dahomey's boundaries, but also provided access to valuable resources such as land, trade routes, and captives who could be sold as slaves. Huagbaja's strong leadership and strategic vision allowed Dahomey to flourish both politically and economically. He implemented effective administrative systems that enhanced governance, including the establishment of a centralized bureaucracy and a hierarchical structure within the kingdom. This enabled greater control over the conquered territories and facilitated the implementation of policies to further strengthen Dahomey's authority. Throughout its early history, Dahomey gained renown for its intricate artwork, vibrant Vodun traditions, and the famed Dahomey Amazons, a formidable all-woman military unit. Huegbaja's rule fostered cultural and artistic achievements within Dahomey. The kingdom experienced a renaissance of traditional crafts, such as wood carving, metalwork, and pottery. Skilled artisans produced intricate and highly sought-after works that showcased the kingdom's cultural vibrancy and artistic prowess. Overall, under Huegbaja's influence, Dahomey thrived as a powerful and influential kingdom. Through effective administration, the flourishing of Vodun, territorial expansion, and cultural achievements, Dahomey solidified its dominance and left a lasting legacy in the region. As the 18th century dawned, Dahomey embarked on a trajectory of economic growth and expansion. But a significant portion of this prosperity was derived from the practice of slave trading, in which they engaged with European traders. In a world where the choices were either enslaving others or facing enslavement themselves, Dahomey opted for the former. Dahomey engaged in the capture and sale of individuals in the Atlantic slave trade, receiving goods such as rifles, tobacco, and alcohol in exchange. Additionally, the kingdom retained some captives for enslavement within its own territory, compelling them to toil on plantations and produce food for its military and royal members. The annual customs of Dahomey frequently incorporated mass executions of enslaved individuals for the purpose of human sacrifice, alongside the offering of gifts and the performance of Vodun ceremonies. The origins of the Dahomey Amazons. At the core of this kingdom resided the legendary Dahomey Amazons, a revered all-female military force renowned for their unmatched courage, expertise, and unwavering loyalty. The Dahomey Amazons are veiled in uncertainty, but they emerged during the reign of Huegbaja as a collective of hunters known as Gbeto. Much of the information about them stems from the accounts of European visitors who bestowed the name Amazons upon them. Predictably, these European perspectives portrayed the Dahomey Amazons as excessively masculine, instilling fear within them. However, the women themselves referred to each other as Mino, meaning our mothers in the Fon language. Some of them also held the title of Ahosi, signifying king's wives. The Dahomey Amazons grew in numbers significantly, with estimations surpassing 6,000 women by 1850. The women embraced a life of singleness, dedicating themselves entirely to the kingdom and shunning conventional expectations associated with traditional femininity. The kingdom of Dahomey's penchant for frequent conquests and violence led to many men's deaths, and the kingdom gave up many of their own people as slaves, by force, to the more powerful Oyo Empire. This is where the Dahomey women hunters likely rose in the military ranks to become fighters. Some of them were captives, but many came from Dahomey, volunteering to be of service. Of course, women who did not play by the rules ended up in the regiment. They could hone their undesirable traits into something useful for war. They went through intense training, getting into supreme physical shape, and deadening their overt emotions towards death and violence. Becoming a Mino was an avenue for many women to obtain what they didn't have previously: wealth, status, and influence. There were different specializations among them, with some being experts with rifles or bow and arrow, their uniforms marking regiment distinctions. In the film The Woman King, Viola Davis's character Nansika represents one of the Mino's commanders, a woman warrior whose skill and leadership surpasses her counterparts. After the Dahomey Amazons fought in the Franco-Dahomeyan Wars and lost over 2/3 of their members, they were disbanded after France's takeover.
All right, let me interject right here real quick because this is interesting that this movie. So this is the movie that it was referring about, not the movie. This is me personally. I have not and will never watch The Woman King because the name itself is ridiculous. And if you wanted to do a movie to make anything interesting that would appeal to intellectual people, try naming it properly. Because a movie called The Woman King infers that a woman is trying to rule over men, and that's not anything that I'm trying to perpetuate. So, I have no interest. I love The actress, that lead actress, what's her name?
Viola Davis.
Viola Davis, yes. I love Viola Davis. She is dynamic in acting. I loved her in Fences. That was some magnificent acting. Her ability to let her emotion just fire off like she did was amazing. And her acting dynamic is grand. But I refuse to support a movie to basically to degrade my people. And putting a woman in the place of a man is a degradation of my people. So, got anything on that?
Well, that really wasn't what the movie was about. I checked it out.
Yeah.
And that wasn't what the movie was about. It dealt more with this kingdom, dealing with the Europeans in slave trade. Now, many of our people, they hear that this kingdom was dealing in slaves, and automatically when they hear that, they think, oh, this was Ham. This was Ham selling Israelites. But that couldn't be further from the truth. There's so many, and we can even, dig into it like after this video. But, if we were to look up, just type in Google Dahomeyan Jews, and you're going to see like the wealth of information that's going to pop up. Certain historians, not in antiquity, but around the 1800s and 1700s, they said that this area was, but in this area resides Levitical Israelites, and they based that off of how they saw them circumcising their men on the 8th day, their men children, and also of how they sacrificed animals. So these were Yahudim, or these were Israelites.
I certainly wouldn't doubt that, and I don't doubt that the movie was more than just that. But that's what the title told me, and it made it completely unappealing. So I never did deal with it. It's been on it's been on cable, and so I just, whenever I see it, I'm like, nope, not getting a view for me, because I know that well, I don't know, but that's what I took as the title to me.
And I get that. But if you want an idea of what it looked like because this wasn't a good period for our people either. Now we were in West Africa, being governed by our own people at the time, dealing with the Europeans, but life still wasn't sweet. There was a scramble for Africa, and we began selling ourselves for commodities, and it really tore up the region. But if you want an idea of what it looked like, see how these women are dressed here. There's one of the armies that they were fighting against were part of the Yoruba Empire, and like I said, like when I first came into this walk, brothers are going to be telling you that these Nigerians, this is what they're going to be saying, or these Africans are Ham, these ugly Hamites. But like you see these European warriors, and you can clearly see that they're Israelites, like just the way that they look. So I if you have time, sometime I can just for free. That way you're not you're not promoting or patronizing something that you don't believe in, and I take my hat off to you for standing for something. But it'd be something, because you would actually dig it. You not so much what it's about or that, but just what it looked like to be in West Africa around that time. You would dig that,
Okay, kind. Yeah, we might have to do that. That sounds like a win for it. So. All right, well, let's get back to it and continue the apparently he's kind of going, some of what he's going to bring forth is going to be kind of in opposition to what the movie brought forth. So let's dig into it deeper here.
Some of the warriors went on to live a traditional life, while others struggled after years of combat. Interestingly, the last living Dahomey Amazon is thought to be Nawi, a main character in The Woman King, played by South African actress Thuso Mbedu. Fact versus fiction. The film Woman King portrays Nawi, a recruit who receives guidance from Nansika. In 1978, the real Nawi conversed with a historian, revealing her involvement in combat against the French nearly 90 years prior. Sadly, she passed away in November of the following year, with estimates suggesting she was over 100 years old. Although it may seem improbable for a woman who lived until 1979 to have fought in a 19th century war, the regiment allowed girls as young as 8 to join their ranks. Therefore, it is plausible that Nawi was a preteen or even a teenager during those battles. The Agoji, a historically factual group that endured for over a century, have also served as inspiration in popular culture, notably seen in the portrayal of the Dora Milaje in the film Black Panther. These all-female special forces originate from the fictional African nation of Wakanda and first appeared in Marvel comic books. Their significant role continued on screen in 2018, and the sequel, Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, further highlighted the women of Wakanda. The producers of Woman King acknowledged that Black Panther played a significant role in paving the way for films highlighting the stories of people of color, which have often been marginalized in the Hollywood industry. The Woman King represented a groundbreaking milestone as the first major motion picture in the United States to delve into the narrative of the Agoji. Additionally, it explored the involvement of Dahomey in the slave trade, albeit with a glossed-over representation of King Gezo's temporary suspension of the kingdom's participation in 1852, followed by its reinstatement later. The mere existence of the Agoji was an anomaly. European visitors referred to them as the Dahomey Amazons, in reference to the all-female Amazon warriors of Greek mythology. Again, the actual origins of the Dahomey Amazons are cloudy, although the first recorded mention of them dates back to 1729. One theory suggests that the Agoji began as a dedicated group of elephant hunters. Another theory is that Queen Hangbi, the twin sister of King Akaba, planted the seed for the idea of the women warriors in the early 1700s, the role slavery played in the Dahomey kingdom. The Agoji and the Dahomey are not without complexity. In The Woman King, Nanisca experiences firsthand the horrors of slavery and works to convince King Gezo to stop participating in the slave trade, or at least to end the tributary status of the Dahomey to the Oyo Empire. But the Dahomey did derive much of their wealth from participating in the slave trade. The Woman King opens in 1823, the year that King Gezo finally freed Dahomey from its tributary status. Although the movie acknowledges that Dahomey does participate in the slave trade at the time, Nanisca is resolved to completely end the kingdom's involvement, a concern she brings directly to the king, who seems to agree, a milestone that did not actually happen until decades later. Dahomey's involvement in the slave trade, which constituted approximately 5% of slave exports from Africa, is an undeniable tragedy. However, a society can possess progressive and advanced aspects while simultaneously inflicting immense harm. When discussing European history, scholars are increasingly acknowledging the continent's significant role in the slave trade. This recognition does not overshadow the contributions made by each nation to the world. Rather, it highlights the intertwined nature of their existence. While it is crucial to confront and understand the legacy of Dahomey and the slave trade, we must also explore the independent achievements of any continent or country, as we do with others. This comprehensive approach allows for a more nuanced understanding of history. Life of a warrior. The Amazons of Dahomey were often described as leading celibate lives. In 1851, they were observed to live in chastity, not supposed to marry, and to reject their natural desires. Another account stated that they were bound to perpetual celibacy under the threat of death. This description is not entirely accurate, as the Amazons were legally married to the king of Dahomey. Nonetheless, only a small number of them had the privilege of engaging in sexual relations with the king, and those who did were exempted from active military duty. As wives of the king, the Amazons were forbidden from having sexual relations with anyone else. Adultery with a royal wife was punishable by death. In 1864, an incident occurred where 150 pregnant Amazons and their partners were brought to trial, resulting in the execution of 8 men, while others faced imprisonment or demotion within Dahomey society. Consequently, as long as they were Amazons, the women remained celibate. Not all of them were virgins, as some had been recruited through capture or judicial punishment and had prior sexual experiences. In 1864, it was estimated that 2/3 of the Amazons were virgins, while others had been married before. European observers speculated about the effects of this sexual abstinence on the Amazons, believing that celibacy may have contributed to their effectiveness as soldiers. They argued that the excitement of battle served as a substitute for sexual fulfillment, causing the Amazons to forget their other desires. Some modern studies have also echoed these notions. It is worth mentioning that the enforced celibacy of the Amazons was considered problematic within Dahomeyan life as well. According to tradition, new recruits underwent clitoridectomy as a means to reduce their sexual drive. One scholarly account suggests that the Dahomeyan Amazons may have practiced lesbianism, albeit subtly mentioned in a scholarly footnote and expressed through cryptic references. As a rule, these fighting celibataires prefer the morosa voluptas of the schoolmen and the peculiarities of the 10th muse. The mention of the 10th muse refers to the lesbian poetess Sappho. It remains uncertain whether this belief reflects anything more than scholarly conjecture. It could have been an inference based on the presence of licensed prostitutes serving the male population in Dahomey, along with a corresponding group appointed to serve within the Amazons. Yet this may also be a matter of conjecture. The names given to the Amazons in Dahomey had metaphorical implications and represented various conventional female roles. In Dahomeyan idiom, they were referred to as mothers, Mino, in relation to the male officials and soldiers they supported. Simultaneously, in relation to the king himself, they were called wives, ahosi, a term that generically applied to all women associated with the palace, including eunuchs, rather than solely referring to sexual partners. Another perspective on the relationship between the Amazons and the king portrayed them as his daughters. While no specific explanation for this idiom has been found in existing literature, its significance can be inferred. It may have conveyed dependence or subordination, similarly to how the king's male soldiers might be called his sons. However, it appears that there was more to it, as the Amazons themselves described their connection to the king as his daughters in 1850. They stated, "Gezo has borne us again. We are his wives, his daughters, his soldiers, his sandals." This expression could indicate that women recruited as Amazons, particularly free Dahomeyan women under the conscription system established during the reign of Gezo, were expected to sever their ties with their families, dedicating their loyalty exclusively to the king. Women versus men. From a modern standpoint, the inclusion of women in traditionally male-dominated employment can be seen as a challenge to male dominance and a declaration of equal rights and abilities. This connection was acknowledged by at least one observer in the 1880s who encountered the Dahomeyan Amazons and criticized women advocating for their rights, arguing that equality should logically include the obligation to serve and risk death in war. On a more positive note, a French journalist from the 1930s reinterpreted the formation of the Amazons, along with the sexual freedom enjoyed by women of the royal lineage, as part of a feminist movement among Dahomeyan women. Employing women as soldiers in Dahomey was undoubtedly perceived as a challenge to traditional gender norms, asserting women's equality with, or even superiority over men. However, in their attempt to assume conventional male roles, the Amazons seem to reject their own femininity rather than affirm it. Accounts from scholars in 1850 reveal that the Amazons claim to have been reborn as men under the king's authority. "We were women. We are now men. Gezo has borne us again." The testimony of former Amazon Tata Ajache, recorded in the 1920s, confirms this indigenous Dahomeyan belief. After killing and disemboweling her first enemy, she was told, "You are a man." Thus, the traditional association of courage with masculinity was reinforced rather than challenged. Paradoxically, the Amazons perpetuated the stereotype that linked femininity with cowardice. In 1850, they sang about their recent victory over the Ashanti, stating, "We marched against the Atakpamans as against men. We came and found them women." While serving as Amazons allowed individual women to gain personal empowerment, achieve recognition, and even rise to positions of command and political influence, it was within the framework of serving a male monarch. Unlike the Amazons of classical antiquity, the Dahomey Amazons fought not against, but in support of male rule. In Dahomey, women's path to advancement lay through rather than outside subservience. However, in this regard, the Dahomey Amazons were no different from men. In Dahomey, everyone's success depended on the favor of the king, irrespective of gender. Decline of the Kingdom of Dahomey. As the mid-19th century approached, the kingdom faced a decline due to increasing pressure from Britain to cease their involvement in the slave trade. It was during this period, under the rule of King Gezo, that the kingdom faced the challenging decision of relinquishing this lucrative business, to which the king staunchly objected. Dahomey began to crumble as a fearsome kingdom in several interconnected ways. First, the Royal Navy put a blockade and patrols at Dahomey's coast in order to force the kingdom to abolish the dreaded slave trade. The abolition of the transatlantic slave trade had a significant impact on Dahomey's economy. Dahomey had relied on the slave trade as a major source of revenue, and its decline meant a loss of income and disrupted economic systems. With the decline of the slave trade, Dahomey's economy needed to adapt. The kingdom attempted to engage in legitimate commerce, such as palm oil and other agricultural exports. However, the transition from a slave-based economy to a new economic model proved challenging, and Dahomey struggled to establish stable trade networks and maintain economic prosperity. Second, internal struggles and political instability caused Dahomey to face internal conflicts and power struggles among various factions and royal successors. These internal divisions weakened the kingdom and made it susceptible to external pressures. Additionally, the expansionist policies pursued by some Dahomeyan kings led to conflicts with neighboring states, further draining resources and destabilizing the kingdom. Indeed, the nearby safe haven refugee city-state of Abeokuta defeated Dahomey in a major battle. And third, growing tensions with France set the stage for war in the impending decades. In this turn of events, there were two Franco-Dahomeyan wars, which ended in 1894, with France taking over. Dahomey was situated in an area of West Africa that was heavily targeted by European powers during the scramble for Africa. The French, in particular, sought to expand their colonial influence and control over the region. Dahomey faced increasing pressure from French forces, leading to territorial losses and a reduction in its power and influence. European powers like the French possessed advanced military technologies and superior firepower compared to the armies of Dahomey. This gave them a significant advantage in any conflicts or confrontations, making it increasingly difficult for Dahomey to resist or maintain its independence. Ultimately, a combination of external pressures, economic challenges, internal conflicts, and European colonization contributed to the decline of Dahomey as an independent kingdom. In 1894, Dahomey was formally incorporated into French West Africa as a French protectorate, marking the end of its existence as an independent political entity. Dahomey became French Dahomey, a colony, 10 years later. It transitioned to a self-governing colony, the Republic of Dahomey, with full independence coming in 1960. In 1975, the area got yet another name, the People's Republic of Benin, which later simply became the Republic of Benin. That is the official name today, but is colloquially known as Benin. This has been 400 years. Thank you for joining us on this journey. And
All right. Well, another bit of interesting information shared with the watchers, and interesting stuff. So, yeah, I personally have not delved much into that the kingdom of Dahomey. Shame on me, because I should be well versed in it and know what's what. It's very well possible my people could have come from that very place, and
it's very possible that you have at least one descendant from that kingdom.
Yeah.
Being that, but you know what, I say that, and the reason I said that with you being from Arkansas, but I forget that your family, well, your father's people are from Arkansas, but your mother's people from South Carolina, right?
Yeah, they moved from South Carolina, but I don't know where my father's people came from. I need to find that out.
Yeah, I just assumed, when knowing that you're from Arkansas, that you would have some descendants from Dahomey. And the reason I say that is because a lot of the fine people who made their way to America came via the French, and the French were set up down there in New Orleans, parts of Mississippi, and in fact, that Mississippi River was a gateway or a highway for the slave trade in America. So you had the French supplying, most of those Negroes that came in were fine. A lot of them were from the fine kingdom of Dahomey.
Okay. Well, interesting stuff. So, but yeah, interesting video. A lot to learn. It's definitely not one that you will watch once. Links in the description box, so feel free to dig into 400 years and everything that they had to offer. Lots of good information. Also, the video that we watched from Black Journals. Always shout out to Black Journals, and as well shout out to 400 Years Unleashed for the sharing of information and the well-constructed videos. Praises to the album. That's all I got. Go ahead,
Con, it's we being in this walk, when we hear about women taking on the role of men, we know that is out of, we know that that's off. Like I stated earlier, this region of West Africa was a region in conflict for some time. One would argue that the incorporation of female troops was based on the lack of manpower that was going on with the slave trade. So many young, but even before then, the kings of Dahomey, they had this force of women going out hunting elephants. This would have been his private army for the most part, before they were used in combat. So not only were they used for hunting parties initially, but they were also the king's debt collectors. So what the kings of Dahomey would do, part of their products that they were exchanging for slaves that they would bring in would be gin. So they would get this gin and they would give these female soldiers this gin, and these women would get drunk, and then he would go and tell them to collect money from different people that owed him money. And oftentimes this would result in these female soldiers burning down the home or the hut of this person that they were going to see. These women were very, very wild, I would say, and conditioned to be just tough, tough women, and like I said, we know that this is off, when we hear it, man.
Yeah. I mean, we want to be with a tough woman who is overly masculine, overtly masculine traits, and
right.
Is this where the bath come from?
The who?
The bath.
What's the bath?
was where they circumcised the women.
Okay. You know, that was new information to me. Like, so I'd heard of female circumcision before,
Yeah.
and the reasons that it was done. I'd never heard that the Dahomey warriors, women warriors, were circumcised. I'd never heard that before.
Yeah, yeah. They would keep them from wanting to be, you know, physically.
They won't get turned on if that, you know, it's cut off. You know,
Yeah.
so it's gonna be insensitive. You know.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like, ugh. So, yeah, that's hard.
So you just got some damaged women, you know, some mentally and physically damaged women, really.
Yeah, atrociously. Yeah, that is atrocious, but
Yeah, but it's, you know, it's something off. It's something off with brothers to want to do a woman like that, you know.
yeah. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, it's really crazy because you got so much, so many different aspects and so much. I don't know. It's just it's really crazy, but interesting video. Lots of good information, and praises to the Abba for the ability to get into some of this information and learn a little something and be edified in it. So with that, we're gonna go ahead and close it on out. It's 2 hours and 21 minutes. I think that's pretty good. I think we ever had a video review that long. Yeah, that was 4 videos though, but good information. We're gonna close out with the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter number 12 and verse number 13. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear the Most High and keep His commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. It is so very important that we understand that in the conclusion of the whole matter, we are to fear the Most High and keep His commandments, because this is the whole duty of man. At the end of the day, when it is all said and done, all the dust is settled and all the smoke is cleared. We will be judged on whether we have feared the Most High and kept His commandments. Why? Because this is the entire duty of man. I am your Akazaki Yahoo, joined by my most esteemed Kenaniah, giving all praises, honor, and great esteem unto the Most High Power, Yahuwah Bahashem, Yahushua HaMashiach, and to the 12 tribes of Israel who are scattered to the 4 quarters of the earth. I say, Shalom, Wa Baruchim. That is peace and blessings. And I cannot wait to the day that the Most High brings us back together and we are once again 12 tribes, one family, one nation, under the Most High Power, under one covenant, back in our own land with a heart of flesh and no more a heart of stone. Until that day come, Shabbat Shalom, Israel.
Shabbat Shalom, Yasharah.
Hallelujah. All praises to the